Namo Amida Butsu. And let me get a little closer to you all. So today's Dharma talk is called Going for Refuge, Coming Home. All over the world right now, we find ourselves seeking refuge to keep ourselves and our families safe from coronavirus. And many of us are lucky to have a home where we can take shelter, where we can be safe. And more than likely, many of us have spent more time at home in shelter than we have probably since we were little kids. In a literal way, we've all been called home 2,500 years ago by a great teacher named Shakyamuni Buddha. But being stuck at home is not the same thing as coming home. And coming home not to take yourself out of the world per se or engagement with the world, but what the Buddha invited us to do was to realize that we are already home and to look and to see that fact. So today I want to talk about coming home to ourselves. It's about refuge, time travel, about existential homelessness, and it is about returning to our bodies, to our embodied nature, here and now. Okay, so one of the interesting things I find in sharing the Buddha Dharma, sharing the teachings of the Buddha, is how many people, when they find Buddhism, it feels like it's a returning home for the first time. Excellent. So it is a common feeling. It's this common sense of a returning home, a returning back to something familiar, something something connected, something safe. So how has finding the Buddha's teachings felt like a homecoming? And I know for myself, it's that my life has always felt like it was a journey toward home, a home that I never really had growing up, especially in my dysfunctional home that I was raised. One of the poems on my arm, you can't really read it because it's super tiny. It says this one right there. And that poem, there's a line in it that talks about this existential look for home. And the line from my poem is, quote, "My life is a love letter home, caught in a dust devil, spinning wildly." And the other thing I've noticed is that when one grows up in that kind of environment, one easily becomes lost to oneself. And sometimes that is a survival mechanism. We can become shadows on a wall of someone else's drama. And I think that happens more often than not. I know that I did. And as I grew older without knowing it, I set on a quest to find home. And home was always out there somewhere. And I spent a brief and privileged time purposely homeless some years ago, a desire to live life deliberately, to know what it was like. I lived in a tent and I lived in my car for a while. And it was interesting. houselessness is a condition. Homelessness is a state of mind. And a karmic inheritance, a delusion of our basic ignorance, is this homelessness I'm talking about, not houselessness, a homelessness. For our discussion today, I want to focus on home being something intrinsic to being embodied. For many of us, our homelessness is manifested in our disconnection from our embodied nature. To start, I want to go back a few thousand years to the Buddha, and the Buddha is dying, and he's giving some of his last words to his disciples. So these are some of his last teachings before he goes to his parinirvana. And this is from that time. Quote, "Monks, be islands unto yourselves. Be your own refuge, having no other refuge. Let the Dhamma be an island and a refuge to you, having no other. Those who are islands unto themselves should investigate to the very heart of things." End quote. So the first time I read this quote, I was trying to figure out what the Buddha is telling his monks to do, because I have always heard that a man is no island unto himself, and here is the Buddha telling his monks to be a refuge unto themselves. So what do you think the Buddha was telling his monks? Telling us at this point, because we know about, to just go by yourself, because we know that there is, at the heart of Buddhist teaching, is the truth of interdependence. As Gyomé Kabose Sensei says, there is no I apart from others. So we know that's not what the Buddha is talking about, this idea of this go it alone kind of idea. I think what's important in that quote is the second part of the quote, where it says, quote, "Let the Dhamma, the Dharma, the teachings, be an island and a refuge to you, having no other," end quote. So the Buddha is not saying we do not need one another, but what I think he is telling us is that we miss the mark when we look outside of ourselves for some external object to make us happy, satisfied, and to give us ultimate meaning. That is why every Sunday and during every meditation session, we go for refuge to Buddha, to Dharma, and to Sangha, the three jewels of Buddhism, as the Buddha calls them, and is constantly reminding us, these three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, are constantly reminding us, constantly inviting us to realize that happiness is not something outside of ourselves. Our happiness is not outside of ourselves. Awakening is not outside of ourselves. We're not awakening to something outside, but awakening to something within, awakening to something absolute. Everything on an absolute level is already awakened. It's all of us that need to wake up from our dream, from our stories, from the matrix. Together, we learn this by hearing the call of Namo Amida Butsu. Come as you are, just as you are. We come together in compassionate acceptance, a safe place where we can become our beautifully naked selves. What I take from the Buddha's teaching is that our home is the island on the boundless ocean within ourselves. Our home is Dharma Island. But how do we get to Dharma Island? To get there, we need to leave all of the stand-ins for home, all of the comforts that take us away from our heart's real desire, to return to the Pure Land with our own hearts. Now, this reminds me of the story from the Odyssey by Homer. 10 years they're fighting the wars, and the imprisoned, beautiful nymph Calypso loves Homer so much that she imprisons him and will not let him leave. The war's over. He's not allowed to go home to his family. So finally, Zeus convinces Calypso, let the poor guy home, allow him to build a ship. He is a noble warrior. Allow him to go home to his wife and his family. So as Greek gods are wont to do, they, with all their passions, other gods decided they wanted to play in this drama together, and they got in his way. And my favorite story of the Homer tale, of the Odyssey, is Odysseus. Sorry, not Homer. Odysseus was the one who was trying to get home. Is the story of the lotus eaters. So after Poseidon tries to sink a ship for 9 days of violent storms, they find themselves, Odysseus and his crew, beached on an unknown island. He sends scouts to contact the inhabitants, and a gentle race lives there, and they are so kind, and they eat the flowery lotus fruit. Some of Odysseus's crew tastes the fruit. Quote, of them who ate the honey sweet fruit of lotus was unwilling to take any message back or to go away, but they wanted to stay there with the lotus eating people, feeding on lotus, and they forgot the way home. End quote. I've always imagined them eating the lotuses for years, until one day someone asked how long they had been there, and they were told 10 years. Sometimes it is obstacles of ease, such as our comfort zones, that keep us from our deepest longing. I can guarantee you that the things that mean the most to you, that you want in your life, live outside of any comfort zone that you have. And I really don't think many of us are different than Odysseus' scouts. We want to find home. We want to find the home within ourselves, but we trade it away for our flowery lotus fruit, the fruit that eats time with its mind-numbing satisfaction. This could be seen as too much alcohol, too much weed, too much food, too much sex, too much, add whatever you want. So I want to ask you a question. What are some of the things that you trade away for your journey home to yourself? And use the chat function to join us. Alcohol, approval, very good. Busyness, Netflix, that's mine. Social media. Okay. Okay. As I was putting together this Dharma talk, I started to kind of list off the different things I do to kind of trade that time away, and I could make a list of about 30. It's interesting what we do to kind of numb ourselves, and I really believe that's why in the Tibetan tradition it's called the way of the warrior, the path of the warrior Buddhist practice, because it takes that type of commitment to put down and put aside all these beautiful, lovely lotus flowers that we are so off to partake. And we live in a society that is wont to give us as many lotus flowers as possible. And so we continue to walk half awake, not really being able to find our way home. Now, our journey is less about a place or a destination and more about a way of being. One Buddhist teacher says, Buddhism is less about belief and more about being. The funny thing about the journey home is that you don't have far to go and you don't have to travel a long way. Home is right here, right now, and that is the farthest journey for each of us, because most of us are far from here right now. If you've been aware of your thoughts since you arrived this morning, how long did you spend in the past? How long did you spend in the future? This is how our regular mind works. A time machine monkey swinging back and forth from past and future, and maybe swinging through the here and now, barely noticing. That's why we return back to our breath. Our breath can only be in the present moment. It cannot be in the past, and it cannot be in the future. Our breath is here and now. I think our heart's desire for home is how Ethan Nichtern puts it in his book, The Road Home. Quote, "It doesn't matter where I live, because I always feel at home. I belong here, no matter where here is. If you were here, you'd be home now." End quote. And here he's talking about our conscious awareness of our heart mind. We are comfortable in our own skin, in the content of our own experience as it is, not as we want or think it should be. And this goes back to our Dharma talk last Sunday about that compassionate acceptance of what is. It's about taking up space. It's about feeling that we have a right to take up space, to be. When we are not, we tend to look outside ourselves for a more stable and fixed abode. The problem is there isn't one. We end up wandering from yesterday's solution, which has become today's problem, and on and on and on. So what is getting in our way from opening the door of our hearts and walking in? First, we need to stop, be still, and breathe. Returning home is returning to the right now, to the flow of now. We can return to right now through our breathing in, breathing out. Again, we focus on our breathing because breathing is in the here and now, not in the past, not in the future. Koyo Kobose sensei, my teacher, was sharing a story about being at an interfaith conference, posed a question asked by a Christian minister that went something like this, quote, "As you know, Jesus Christ is our rock of our salvation, the bedrock of our teaching. Do Buddhists have a similar rock?" End quote. And as I was listening to the podcast, I was listening to him teach, the first thing that came to my mind as a Buddhist, what is my rock? And my rock is the present moment. And the beautiful moment was when he, my mentor, says, I said to her, and it came to my mind, the present moment, that moment of aligning that happens when truth is spoken. The foundation of everything else is being fully in the moment, being that is complete. We need to return home to find our home. That seems rather paradoxical. I left my inner self to find a home outside of myself. And so doing, I wandered and wondered where I went. During that time, I wrote a poem, and I want to share it now with you, and it's titled Homecoming. It is an original poem. I was the same, but I was waiting for myself on the shore to return. Murakami. It's a difficult time. So you wait for yourself to come back. You wait on the pier, watch pelicans pirouette in the air, weightless, for a moment, and then diving. The sound of their splash reminding you of something you just can't quite remember. You sit there eating fish after fish, wash them down with beer. You have started counting seagulls and giving them long Spanish names. You choreograph ballets, make architectural drawings of dreams, and have started to build a house of seashells. On the weekends, people come just to see you waiting for yourself. Where did you go, they ask. You just shrug. You make new friends. You take up painting and paint self-portraits, your image repeated like the latitude and longitude lines on a map. Early every morning, you lean against the railing. The seagulls have joined you now. You've made them tiny red scarves that they all wear. All of you stare, being still as glass, as if any movement might blur vision. All of you are staring out to sea, straining to see you coming back, straining to see the prow of the boat cutting the silver morning water. I think that we see ourselves on that boat coming back when we first find the boat or the raft, and the raft or the boat is the Dharma, is the teachings of the Buddha. I also think that's what T.S. Eliot meant when he wrote, quote, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time," end quote. So coming back to ourselves is when we stop looking outside of ourselves for home, for something to fill our feelings of loss, to lessen the sense of separateness. When we begin to realize our search outside of ourselves has been fruitless. We have spent so much time searching that we become strangers to ourselves. So come home is coming back to mindfulness. And I like how Ethan Nectarn puts it. Meditation is really the act of making friends with yourself, end quote. To really make friends with oneself, we need to spend time with ourselves. This also sounds paradoxical because how can we spend more time with ourselves than we already do? Is it that paradoxical? The message of today's talk is really simple, is to have each of us spend quality time with ourselves, with our heart mind. Meditate, reflect on those things that are important to you, that your heart mind aspire for. Allow it to fill your heart. Avoid eating the lotus flowers, whatever they are, and breathe into the here and now, into our embodied nature, to be present in the flow of now. The Buddha way is less about believing something and more about being. It's a call to presence, a call to being who you are, just as you are. Namo Amida Butsu, come as you are, with all your stories. Bring them all. It doesn't matter what you've done or left undone. Come as you are. And I'd like to close today's Dharma talk with two poems. And over my life, I have lived in at least 30 different residences. actual walled places. That's not counting the bus and the car and a tent or not. And very few of those have ever really felt like home. And the ones that did feel like home were the ones in which I engaged with the space. The door, the windows, and the walls became my friends. I cooked, I dreamed, I painted, I cried, I made love. But more importantly, I lived in this space and I allowed myself to be unencumbered, to take everything off and to be my simple, beautiful, naked self. And I think more importantly, I lived in that space and I did welcome every guest. As Rumi says in this poem, quote, "This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from the beyond." End quote. As I did in this space I called home, so I can do the same in the boundless space which is within my heart. And lastly, I want to share a poem from Derek Walcott. This one is called Love After Love. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another. Who knows you by heart? Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. End quote. May we all greet ourselves at our own doors and say, "Welcome, welcome, welcome home." Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you, everyone, for watching the Dharma Talk. We are grateful for your practice and grateful that you have joined us. And if you want to support the fellowship, we would be very grateful. You can go to our webpage, which is saltlakebuddhist.org, and there you will find a tab on how to donate online. And we look forward to your support, and we enjoy spending time with you. And again, thank you for your practice, and thank you for joining us. Again, you can reach us at saltlakebuddhist.org, or you can reach out to me directly at sensei@saltlakebuddhist.org. Thank you, and have a Buddhaful day.